They say the body always knows when it can't take any more. Sometimes it whispers, other times it shouts through the silence. That morning, the warning came quietly. The smell of coffee filled the small kitchen as Mrs. Lourdes Reyes stirred the cup with slow, tired hands. The spoon slipped. Her fingers felt numb. A dizziness climbed from her stomach to her head, and suddenly the room tilted like a slow-turning carousel. The mug hit the floor and shattered. For a moment, she could still hear the ticking of the wall clock, 7:15, and then everything vanished into a gray blur. When her eyes opened again, lights were flashing above her, cold metal against her skin. Voices moved fast around her. "Blood sugar 40, someone called out. She couldn't understand where she was. A young doctor leaned over, his voice steady, professional but kind. "Stay with us, Mrs. Reyes. You're going to be okay." The words floated somewhere between dream and reality. Her heart pounded, weak and frantic, as the sound of the monitor beeped like a stubborn heartbeat refusing to quit. That's how Mrs. Lourdes Reyes arrived at St. Luke's Medical Center, between life and exhaustion, her body screaming for help in the only language it still remembered. Lourdes was 67, a retired seamstress, a widow, and the kind of woman who still ironed her pillowcases because she believed in order, even inside the chaos of old age. She had lived in the same small house for 30 years, surrounded by fading pictures of her late husband and her only son, Carlos. Since the day diabetes entered her life, the disease had slowly become another family member, demanding, unpredictable, always hungry for attention. At first, Carlos had been patient, helping her measure insulin and count every spoon of sugar. But time changed him. He started controlling everything, her medicine, her meals, even her checkbook. "You don't need to worry, Mama," he would say, taking the pen from her trembling fingers. "I'll handle it." And she let him, because love makes people surrender in small, invisible ways. Before we go deeper into this story, into the hospital corridors, the secrets, and the moment Mrs. Reyes finally stood up for herself, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. That's how we keep bringing real stories like this one, stories about life, family, and the fragile line between care and control. Now, let's return to the woman in the hospital bed, her skin pale under the fluorescent light, her pulse beginning to calm. Because what happens next will remind you that healing doesn't always come from medicine. Sometimes it comes from courage. The next morning, the hospital smelled of sanitizer and fresh coffee. Mrs. Reyes opened her eyes to the soft rustle of curtains and the gentle voice of a nurse. "Good morning, Mrs. Reyes. Can you hear me? Wiggle your fingers for me." She obeyed slowly, still lost between sleep and awareness. A plastic bracelet circled her wrist. An IV line climbed to a clear bag, dripping life back into her veins. Her mouth was dry, but she managed a faint smile. "Doctor." Andrew Collins stepped into the room, a young internist with a tired face and kind eyes. He had seen hundreds of cases like hers, but there was something different in the way she looked at him, like someone who didn't expect kindness anymore. "You had a severe hypoglycemic episode," he explained gently. "Your blood sugar dropped very low, but you're safe now." She nodded, unsure if she should apologize. "I didn't mean to worry anyone," she whispered. Hours later, the door opened sharply. Carlos rushed in, phone pressed to his ear, irritation already painted on his face. "Mom, I told you not to mess with the stove. Do you want to end up like this again?" He hung up and sighed loudly, shaking his head. The nurse stepped back, pretending to check the monitor, while Dr. Collins watched in silence. The tone of the man's voice wasn't care, it was control. "I'm fine, mijo," she murmured. "I just wanted coffee." "Coffee?" he repeated, almost mocking. "You don't get it, do you? You can't do anything alone." Dr. Collins placed a chart back on the counter. "She's doing well now," he said softly. "Let's give her some time to rest." Carlos forced a smile toward the doctor. "Of course, Doc, but you have no idea how stubborn she is." He leaned toward his mother, whispering, "Stop talking so much, okay? Let me handle everything." She nodded quietly. Years of habit made that nod automatic, the kind that keeps the peace even when it hurts. When Carlos left, the room seemed to exhale. The nurse adjusted the IV and smiled. "He must worry a lot about you. Mrs. Reyes looked at the window instead of answering. Outside, the city moved in slow motion. Cars, clouds, people who didn't know how heavy love could feel. Later that afternoon, Dr. Collins returned for rounds. He checked her chart again and frowned. This wasn't her first collapse. There were at least 3 similar hospitalizations over the past year, all marked low blood glucose. Same pattern, same outcome, same son. Something inside him tightened. The instinct that tells a good doctor that not everything on the surface is true. "Do you remember what you ate before you fainted?" he asked. She hesitated. I don't remember. Carlos takes care of my meals. Sometimes he says I don't need dinner if my sugar looks fine." The doctor nodded slowly, hiding his concern. He had seen this kind of dependence before. Patients who handed over their lives one decision at a time, until they forgot how to make any. That night, alone in her hospital bed, Mrs. Reyes stared at the ceiling. The hum of machines felt almost like breathing beside her. She thought about her late husband, how he used to say, "A person needs to trust their own hands." Her hands now trembled slightly, weak but alive. She wondered when she had stopped trusting them. Across the hallway, Dr. Collins wrote notes on his tablet. "Patient stable. Possible mismanagement of insulin at home." He paused before typing the next line. "Will reassess family dynamics." He knew that sometimes the real disease wasn't in the bloodstream, it was in the way people loved each other. Outside, the night deepened. Rain began tapping softly on the hospital windows. Mrs. Reyes closed her eyes, letting the sound wash over her. Tomorrow, she thought, I'll be stronger. But she didn't know that tomorrow would bring a conversation that would change everything. The first moment when someone would finally say to her, "You have the right to take care of yourself." And that's where this story truly begins. And the patient starts believing she can. The day ended with sunlight cutting through the blinds, painting golden stripes across her bed. For the first time in months, Mrs. Reyes felt something warm that had nothing to do with sugar. Hope. She didn't know that tomorrow would bring confrontation, truth, and the hardest decision she'd ever face. But for now, she rested, her pulse steady, the world outside humming softly, as if the city itself were whispering, "Keep going, Lourdes. You're almost free." The third morning at St. Luke's began like the others. Soft light, beeping monitors, and the slow shuffle of nurses moving from room to room. But inside Mrs. Lourdes Reyes, something had shifted. She woke earlier than usual before the breakfast trays arrived and sat upright without help. Her hands still trembled, but the tremor no longer frightened her. It reminded her she was alive. Emma appeared with her usual smile. "Look at you, sitting up already." "I wanted to see the sunrise," Lourdes said. "It's different from home." Emma opened the blinds, and the room filled with a pale gold glow. "Different how?" "At home, I watch it through the curtains." Lourdes answered softly. "Here, I have nothing to hide behind." Dr. Collins entered soon after, holding a clipboard. "Good morning, Mrs. Reyes. Feeling stronger?" She nodded. "Stronger and hungrier. That's an excellent combination." He smiled. "Let's talk about your next steps." He reviewed her sugar levels, adjusted a note in her chart, then looked at her. "Have you tried taking your insulin by yourself today?" "I did, doctor." Emma watched. She said I didn't even flinch. "Then she's right. You're ready to learn the rest." Their conversation was interrupted by the sharp knock of the door. Carlos walked in, wearing sunglasses even though it was cloudy outside. He carried a coffee he hadn't bought for her. "How's the star patient today?" Lourdes smiled timidly. "Better, mijo. I learned to do the injection." He frowned. "Why?" "You'll just mess it up." Dr. Collins intervened calmly. "Actually, she did quite well. Learning to self-manage is part of her treatment." Carlos crossed his arms. "You doctors think you know everything. She forgets things. I'm the one who keeps her safe." "Safety and independence aren't opposites," Collins said evenly. "They're partners. One doesn't work without the other." The room tightened. Emma glanced from one face to the other and quietly slipped out, closing the door halfway. Carlos leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Doctor, with all due respect, you don't know my mother. She panics when she's alone. She loses things. I've been handling her medication for years." Lourdes tried to speak, but he lifted a hand. Let me finish, Mom. Dr. Collins set the clipboard down. I respect your concern, Mr. Reyes, but I need to make sure she understands her own care. That's medical ethics. Carlos scoffed. Ethics? My mother's a patient, not a project. She's both, the doctor replied quietly. And she's a person before either of those. Silence. Only the monitor beeped. Then Carlos laughed, short and sharp. Fine. Teach her whatever you want. Just remember who signs the forms. He turned to his mother. Don't let them confuse you. And he left, the door swinging shut behind him. Lourdes stared at the empty doorway. He didn't mean it like that, she whispered. Collins pulled up a chair beside her bed. I'm not here to judge him, but I need you to be honest with me. Has he ever taken your medication money for other things? Her eyes dropped to the blanket. The question floated between them like smoke. After a long moment, she nodded once. He says the bills are too high, that I cost too much. The doctor exhaled slowly. You don't cost too much. You're his mother. Tears welled, trembling at the edge of her lashes. Sometimes I think he forgot that part. Later that day, Collins requested a meeting with the hospital's social work team. He didn't reveal everything. He couldn't. But he explained enough for them to check whether Mrs. Reyes was being financially exploited. It was a delicate line to walk. He knew reporting could destroy the fragile trust she still had in her son, yet doing nothing would betray the trust she had placed in him. When he returned to her room, she was knitting. A half-finished scarf rested on her lap. I used to make clothes for my neighbors, she said, smiling faintly. Now I make scarves for nurses who forget their lockers. He sat beside her. That's generous. She looked up. Generous is just another word for afraid to keep things. The next day, Carlos didn't come. Hours stretched like long corridors. Mrs. Reyes practiced her injections, read pamphlets, and chatted with other patients. She began to laugh again, quiet laughs, careful but genuine. Dr. Collins watched from afar, wondering how many more patients like her had lived half their lives under someone else's shadow. By evening, the son finally appeared carrying flowers that looked more like apology than affection. Hey, Mom. He set them down awkwardly. Sorry about yesterday. I was stressed. Work stuff. She smiled gently. It's all right, mijo. I know you mean well. Dr. Collins stepped in for his rounds. Good evening, Mr. Reyes. Carlos nodded, forced politeness. Doc, I'm happy to report your mother's sugar levels are steady, Collins said. If this continues, she might be ready for discharge soon. Great, Carlos said quickly. We'll handle the rest at home. She'll be trained before leaving, the doctor added. I'll make sure she has everything she needs to manage on her own. Something flickered behind Carlos's smile. Of course. When he left again, Collins lingered. Mrs. Reyes, do you have anyone else you trust? A friend, maybe? Just my church group, but I haven't gone in months. Would you like me to ask a social worker to visit? They could help you plan your care at home. She hesitated. Will that upset my son? Sometimes help looks like trouble at first, he said. But real help keeps you safe. That night, she dreamed again of sewing. This time the needle moved smoothly, closing the tear she had opened in the last dream. But when she looked closer, she saw that each stitch was made from her own courage. Morning came with a heavy sky and the smell of rain. Mrs. Reyes was eating breakfast when the doctor entered with a different expression, half relief, half determination. We're making arrangements, he told her. You'll have a diabetes educator visit your home after discharge, and a counselor, if you'd like. She looked frightened. Does Carlos know? Not yet, he said gently. I'll talk to him today. Her spoon clinked against the bowl. Please, doctor, don't make him angry. I'll be careful, he promised. That afternoon in the hospital cafeteria, Dr. Collins found Carlos scrolling on his phone. Mr. Reyes, can we talk? Carlos looked up, cautious. Sure, about what? About your mother's discharge plan. The doctor sat opposite him. She's doing well, but I'm arranging additional support at home. Carlos's brow furrowed. Support? She doesn't need strangers in the house. She needs autonomy, Collins replied. That's part of her healing. Carlos leaned forward. You think I'm the problem, don't you? I think she deserves to understand her own life. Carlos laughed bitterly. You have no idea how much I've done for her. I don't doubt that, Collins said. But love without freedom isn't care. It's control. Carlos stood abruptly, the chair scraping the floor. You don't know what she'd be without me. I think we're both about to find out, Collins answered calmly. He watched as the man stormed off. For a moment, he questioned himself. Doctors weren't meant to interfere. But this wasn't interference. It was protection. When he returned to the ward, Mrs. Reyes was sitting by the window again, the scarf now finished. She held it up proudly. For Emma, she said. It's beautiful, Collins replied. It's warm, she added. I like to think warmth is what keeps people alive. He smiled. I think you're right. Outside, the rain finally broke, heavy and cleansing. The doctor left her room, closing the door quietly, unaware that Carlos had stopped by the nurse's station to demand discharge papers. The storm that would test every truth between mother and son was already forming. And that's where Block 4 will begin. Inside the hospital, with confrontation, fear, and the first spark of real independence. The rain didn't stop that afternoon. It fell steady and hard against the hospital windows, turning the city outside into a blur of gray and silver. Inside St. Luke's, the air felt charged, as if the storm had slipped through the hallways. Nurses moved faster, phones rang louder, and in room 214, Mrs. Lourdes Reyes sat watching the raindrops slide down the glass like slow tears she no longer wanted to shed. She sensed something was coming. Maybe it was the way Emma kept glancing at the door, or how Dr. Collins had spoken to her that morning. Calm, but with a hint of caution in his voice. If anything feels uncomfortable today, he had said, you call the nurses, all right? She had nodded, not understanding fully, but trusting the kindness behind his eyes. By early afternoon, the door opened with a push that rattled the hinges. Carlos walked in, soaked from the rain, his voice already tight with anger. Pack your things, Mom. We're leaving. Lourdes blinked, startled. Leaving? But the doctor said, I talked to the desk. They said she's cleared for discharge, he interrupted, waving a stack of forms he hadn't finished reading. You've been here long enough. Home is better for you. She looked toward the hallway, her pulse racing. Carlos, I don't think, just move, he snapped. I'm tired of wasting time in this place. The door opened again, quietly this time. Dr. Collins entered, holding a patient file, his expression composed but firm. Mr. Reyes, can I have a word? Carlos turned, jaw clenched. Not unless it's about signing her out. It is, Collins said, closing the file. But before you do that, we need to talk about her care plan. She's not ready to leave today. Carlos scoffed. That's not your decision. She's my mother. And she's my patient, the doctor replied evenly. For a moment, the rain filled the silence between them. The two men faced each other, one standing tall in a white coat, the other leaning forward with frustration, both claiming to protect the same woman. She's stable, Carlos insisted. She can rest at home. Stable isn't the same as safe, Collins said. Her glucose levels need monitoring, and she's still learning to manage her doses. I'll do that, Carlos shot back. The doctor didn't raise his voice. We both know that hasn't worked before. Lourdes' heart pounded. She wanted to disappear into the sheets. Please don't fight, she whispered. Carlos, maybe the doctor, but her son didn't let her finish. Mom, you don't know what's best for you. You never have. That's why I handle things. Dr. Collins stepped closer. Mr. Reyes, that's enough. Carlos turned on him. You think you're some kind of hero, huh? You don't know what it's like watching someone ruin their health day after day. I'm the one who's been cleaning up after her for years. Then maybe it's time you stop cleaning up, the doctor said quietly. And let her stand. The words hit the air like thunder. Mrs. Reyes froze, tears filling her eyes. Not because of the fight, but because she realized she had never heard anyone defend her that way before. Carlos shook his head. This is ridiculous. You're overstepping. Collins crossed his arms. I'm following protocol. The social worker will be here in 10 minutes. Until then, your mother stays. You called social services? Carlos's face flushed. You have no right. I have a responsibility, Collins said, to protect my patient. Carlos threw the papers onto the bed. You're going to regret this. He turned to his mother. You really want strangers in our business, Mom? Is that what you want? She couldn't answer. Her voice trembled somewhere between fear and guilt. Carlos, please. Let's go, he demanded again. Dr. Collins took a step forward. If you try to remove her against medical advice, security will stop you. The son stared at him, breathing hard. The rain outside pounded like a second heartbeat. Then, without a word, Carlos turned and left the room, the door slamming behind him. Mrs. Reyes sat frozen. Her hands gripped the blanket like a lifeline. You shouldn't have done that, she whispered. Collins sighed and pulled a chair beside her. Maybe not, but someone had to. Tears slipped down her cheeks. He'll be so angry. Maybe, the doctor said softly. But sometimes anger is just fear that doesn't know where to go. For a while, neither spoke. The storm outside began to ease, the sound of rain softening to a rhythm almost like breathing. Then she said, in a voice small but steady, He's all I have. And you, Collins replied, are all you have. That has to count for something. That night after dinner, a social worker named Denise arrived. She was middle-aged, calm, with a notepad full of gentle questions. We just want to make sure you're safe, Mrs. Reyes, she said. No one's here to take sides. Lourdes nodded slowly. She answered each question honestly. Who handled her money? Who managed her medication? Who decided when she could go out? With every answer, the truth became heavier, more undeniable. By the time Denise left, Lourdes felt both lighter and lonelier than she ever had before. Later, Emma came in with clean sheets and a quiet smile. You did good today, she whispered. Lourdes tried to smile back. It doesn't feel good. Change never does, Emma said. Until it does. When the ward lights dimmed, Mrs. Reyes lay awake, listening to the hum of machines. She thought about her husband again. The way he used to tell her, You're stronger than you think, Luli. No one had called her Luli in years. The name itself felt like a key to something she had lost. Somewhere past midnight, she got out of bed. Barefoot, careful, she walked to the mirror above the sink. Her reflection startled her. Pale face, tired eyes, but behind them, a spark. She whispered to it, I can do this. It wasn't loud, but it was the first truth she had said out loud in a long time. The next morning, the storm had passed. The world smelled clean, new. Dr. Collins arrived early with coffee and an encouraging smile. You didn't sleep much, he said. I was thinking, she replied. About what? About starting again, she said simply. He nodded, understanding. We'll begin with one small thing today. You'll prepare and inject your own dose without help. Her hands trembled, but not from fear. Okay. He watched as she measured, tapped the syringe, pressed it gently against her skin. The movement was precise, almost elegant. When she finished, she looked up with tearful pride. You did it, he said. I did it, she whispered, as if the words themselves were medicine. For the first time, Dr. Collins smiled broadly. That's the beginning of everything, Mrs. Reyes. The moment you believe you can. Outside her window, sunlight pushed through the thinning clouds, painting the room in a soft gold glow. Emma walked in, clapping her hands. Our star patient did it. Mrs. Reyes laughed, really laughed, for the first time since her husband died. The sound surprised everyone, including herself, but the joy didn't last long. Around noon, Carlos returned. His expression was unreadable, part guilt, part defiance. Can we talk? He asked. Dr. Collins stayed by the doorway, cautious. Carlos took a breath. Mom, I overreacted yesterday. I'm scared of losing you, okay? She looked at him quietly, her hands folded on the blanket. You almost did, mijo. Not because of my sugar, but because I stopped living. He swallowed hard, eyes darting to the floor. I didn't mean to hurt you. I know, she said, but love isn't supposed to feel like a cage. Dr. Collins said nothing. He simply placed the chart on the counter and stepped out, giving them space. Inside, mother and son sat in silence. Carlos reached for her hand, hesitant, like a boy again. Can we start over? He asked. She squeezed his fingers gently. We both can, she said, but I have to learn to take care of myself. That's what love means now. From the hallway, Collins watched through the window. The storm had finally left the city, and for the first time, light filled every room. But this story wasn't finished yet, because freedom, like healing, doesn't arrive in one day. It begins in moments like this. Small, trembling, beautiful, and that's where Block 5 begins, when Mrs. Reyes steps beyond fear and into her new strength. The next morning began quietly, with sunlight stretching across the pale hospital floor like a warm promise. The storm had left behind a freshness in the air, a smell of wet pavement and new beginnings. Mrs. Lourdes Reyes lay awake, not from pain or fear, but from anticipation. She had slept little, but her heart felt lighter than it had in years. When Emma came in with her usual cheerful greeting, she found Mrs. Reyes already sitting on the edge of the bed, slippers on, robe tied neatly. "Somebody looks ready for the day," the nurse said, smiling. "I am," Lourdes replied. "I want to try the whole thing myself today. The shot, the test, everything." Emma's smile widened. "Then let's do it. You're the boss." They went step by step, careful and patient. The prick of the lancet, the small drop of blood, the steady beep of the glucometer reading a number that was finally within the right range, the measured dose of insulin, the slow push of the plunger. "There," Emma said softly. "Perfect. You didn't even flinch." Mrs. Reyes exhaled, a shaky breath turning into laughter. "I feel like a nurse now." "You feel like someone who just took her life back," Emma corrected gently. When Dr. Collins arrived, she showed him the neatly organized supplies on her bedside table, the pen, the alcohol wipes, the logbook with tidy notes in blue ink. "I've been practicing," she said proudly. He looked genuinely impressed. "You've come a long way in a short time." She nodded. "I think I just needed someone to believe I could. That's all most patients ever need," he replied. As he turned to leave, she said quietly, "Doctor, thank you for not giving up on me." He smiled. "Thank you for not giving up on yourself." For the next few days, the hospital became her classroom. She learned about carbohydrates, timing doses, and recognizing warning signs. Each lesson added another layer of confidence. The other patients began calling her Teacher Lourdes. She would laugh, saying, "If I can learn it, anyone can." Carlos visited daily. The first few visits were awkward, conversations that stumbled between apology and habit. He brought her favorite fruit cup, sat beside her quietly, and listened when she spoke. For the first time, he didn't interrupt. He just listened. One afternoon he asked, "So, how does it feel doing all this on your own?" She smiled gently. "It feels like breathing without asking permission." He nodded, looking away, ashamed. "I guess I made it hard for you to breathe." "You were afraid," she said. Sometimes love hides inside fear and forgets how to show its face. Carlos rubbed his eyes. "You're right. I was scared. After Dad died, I thought if I controlled everything, nothing else bad could happen." She reached out and took his hand. "But bad things still happen, mijo. Control doesn't stop them. It only stops life." Later that evening, Emma found Mrs. Reyes sitting by the window again, her scarf around her shoulders. The sky outside was soft pink, the kind of sunset that makes hospitals fall silent for a moment. "Do you think he'll really change?" Lourdes asked. Emma sat beside her. "Maybe, but that's not the point." "What is then?" "That you changed," Emma said. "That's what matters." That night, Lourdes wrote in her small notebook, the one she'd kept hidden in her purse for years. She wrote, "I'm not just surviving, I'm learning how to live again." Then, below that, she added, "Tomorrow I'll ask if I can help the nurses. Maybe I can teach someone else who's scared like me." The following morning, Dr. Collins walked in and found her at another patient's bedside, gently explaining how to use the glucometer. "See, you just hold it like this. Don't be afraid of the beep. It's your friend," she said, smiling. The patient, an elderly man with shaky hands, laughed. "You should be the one wearing the white coat." "God forbid," she joked. "I've had enough needles for a lifetime." Dr. Collins watched from the doorway, moved. He had seen thousands of patients recover physically, but very few reclaimed their spirit so completely. When she noticed him, she blushed. "I was just helping," she said. You were more than helping, he replied. You were healing someone else just by being yourself. That afternoon, as he checked her chart, he said, Your numbers have been perfect for 4 days. That's something to celebrate. So I can go home soon? Soon, he confirmed. Maybe tomorrow. Her face softened. I'm ready. He studied her for a moment. Are you? She smiled, the kind that came from deep inside. For the first time, yes. Carlos arrived later with a small bouquet of yellow daisies. Mom, I brought these for your window. She placed them in a cup of water and set them beside her bed. They're beautiful. He looked uneasy. The doctor said you might go home tomorrow. That's what he said. Carlos hesitated. I want to do things differently this time. You'll handle your medicine. I'll just be there when you ask. She looked up at him, eyes kind. That's all I ever wanted, mijo. To be trusted to take care of myself. He nodded, voice breaking. I didn't realize how much I was hurting you. I thought I was protecting you. You can protect me by standing next to me, she said softly. Not in front of me. They sat together, quiet but comfortable. The hum of machines filled the room like a lullaby. Later that night, Emma helped Lourdes pack her things. The old woman touched the hospital bed one last time. Funny, she said. I used to think hospitals were just for the sick, but I think I found a piece of myself here. Emma grinned. Then we did our job right. Before bed, Dr. Collins came for a final check. How do you feel? Like I graduated, she said, laughing. He chuckled. You did, and you passed with honors. As the hospital lights dimmed, Mrs. Reyes looked once more at the daisies on the window. Their yellow petals glowed in the low light like tiny suns. She whispered to herself, Tomorrow I go home, but I'm not the same woman who left that house. And for the first time, she meant it. Morning light poured through the hospital windows like a benediction. The world outside St. Luke's was fresh and new, the streets still glistening from the night's drizzle. Inside room 214, the bed was neatly made, the IV stand empty, and the faint smell of antiseptic mixed with the scent of yellow daisies on the windowsill. Mrs. Lourdes Reyes sat on the edge of the bed, dressed in a soft gray sweater and the same floral scarf she'd knitted during her stay. Her suitcase rested by the door, small, worn, but packed with the things that mattered. Her notebook, her logbook, and the plastic insulin kit she now handled like an old friend. Emma entered with her usual brightness. Well, look at you. I almost didn't recognize you without the gown. Lourdes smiled. It feels strange leaving. That's a good sign, Emma said, adjusting the wristband scanner. If you feel too ready to go, it means you didn't learn enough. Lourdes laughed softly. Then I must have learned plenty. A knock at the door. Dr. Collins stepped in, holding her final discharge papers. Good morning, Mrs. Reyes. Good morning, doctor. Blood sugar levels stable, vitals excellent, he said, scanning the chart. You've done the hard part. She tilted her head. And what's the easy part? He met her eyes, keeping it that way. She chuckled, though her heart tightened. I'll try my best. That's all anyone can do, he said. You'll have your follow-up next week, and the diabetes educator will visit once you're settled. You're not alone in this. I know, she said. Then after a pause, I think that's what scared me most. Being alone. But it's not so terrible when you finally know who you are. Dr. Collins smiled, a quiet, proud smile. You've come a long way, Mrs. Reyes. You should be proud of yourself. I am, she said simply. For the first time, I really am. Just then, the door opened again. Carlos stood there holding her coat. His expression was uncertain, eyes tired but softer than before. Ready to go, Mom? She rose slowly, balancing with grace. I think so. As Emma helped her into the coat, Carlos stepped closer. Before we leave, I want to thank you, Doctor, he said quietly, for helping her. And maybe for helping me too. Collins nodded. You both did the work. Carlos looked down, then back at his mother. I'm sorry, Mom, for everything I did that made you feel small. She reached up, cupping his cheek. You were just trying to make me safe. But safety doesn't mean silence, mijo. He nodded, eyes glassy. I'll remember that. They walked slowly through the hallway together, mother, son, and the nurse pushing her small bag on a cart. Other patients waved goodbye. One of them called out, "Don't forget us, Teacher Lourdes." She laughed and waved back. At the elevator, Dr. Collins stopped them. "Before you go, one last thing," he said. "Every patient who leaves this ward gets to give us one piece of advice. What would yours be?" She thought for a moment, then smiled. "Tell them, caring for someone isn't the same as controlling them. It's teaching them to stand." The doctor nodded slowly. "That's one worth remembering." The elevator doors opened. Lourdes stepped inside and turned back toward the hallway. The nurse station, the white floors, the faint echo of monitors, all of it felt strangely sacred now. She raised her hand in a quiet farewell. "Thank you," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if it was to them or to the place that had given her back her strength. The ride down was silent except for the hum of the elevator. Carlos looked at her, almost studying her face, as if seeing her for the first time. "You look different," he said. She smiled. "I feel different." "In a good way?" "In the only way that matters," she replied. When they stepped out into the lobby, the sunlight met them like applause. The world outside smelled of coffee and wet earth. Cars passed, nurses crossed the street, and somewhere in the distance, church bells rang. Carlos opened the passenger door of the car, but she hesitated. "Wait," she said. He frowned. "What is it?" She looked back at the hospital entrance, those wide glass doors that had once frightened her and now felt like home. "I just need a moment." He nodded, stepping aside. She took a deep breath and whispered to herself, "You did it, Lourdes. You came in afraid and you're leaving alive." Then she smiled, got in the car, and closed the door. The drive home was quiet. The rain had washed everything clean. Even the old houses looked new. Carlos drove slower than usual. Once or twice he looked at her hands resting calmly on her lap. "You know," he said softly, "I was thinking, maybe you could show me how to use the glucometer, just in case I ever need to help." She grinned. "Of course, but only if you promise to let me help myself first." He laughed. "Deal." When they reached her street, she stared out at her little house, the peeling paint, the rose bush her husband had planted years ago. It was all still there, waiting for her, but she knew she wasn't walking into the same life. "Home," she said quietly. "Home," Carlos echoed. He helped her to the door, but when he reached for her bag, she stopped him. "I've got it," she said, lifting it herself. He stepped back, watching her turn the key, push the door open, and step inside. The air smelled faintly of dust and old coffee, but also of memories. She set the bag on the counter, went to the kitchen, and filled a pot with water. Her hands were steady now. She smiled as the burner clicked to life. Carlos leaned in the doorway. "Coffee again?" She looked over her shoulder, amused. "Just one cup. The doctor said I can live a little." He laughed. "Then I guess I'll join you." They sat at the small kitchen table, steam rising between them. For a moment, everything felt new and fragile, like the start of spring. Mrs. Reyes lifted her cup, her voice soft but firm. "To freedom," she said. Carlos raised his cup. "To learning how to love better." Their eyes met, and for the first time in years, they saw each other not as burden and caretaker, but as mother and son. The world outside moved on, cars, voices, the sound of life continuing, but inside that little house, something extraordinary had begun, and maybe that's what healing really means. Not miracles or medicine, but moments like these, when a person remembers who they are, and the people who love them finally learn to see them as whole. So if you're listening to this story, take a lesson from Mrs. Lourdes Reyes. Caring isn't about control. It's about courage, about teaching someone you love to stand on their own feet, even if they stumble, even if it scares you. If her story moved you, take a second now to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Every story we tell here reminds us of the quiet strength that lives inside ordinary people, the kind you only discover when life brings you to your knees and asks, "Do you still believe in yourself?" Because sometimes the answer can change everything.